Hello, my name is Volgadorf, and in this tutorial I will be attempting to give you a brief but in-depth description of how to implement your own custom block into Minecraft using data packs and resource packs. The advantages to using this is you can attach them to a world file. Nobody else has to install anything, and the code will work fine even if you upload it to a realm or a server that you are port forwarding. If people download the resource pack, then everything will look perfectly as well. So, what are data packs? They are pretty much just code that says anything that a command block can do. A lot of tutorials out there do a really good job of telling you how to write the code and where to put it. But in my opinion, they're a little lacking on why the code is written the way it is. So I'm going to get into that. So first things first, you have to create your own model. Some prerequisites for this tutorial include BlockBench. I use it to create models, and a simple knowledge of how to create resource and data packs, even if you don't put anything in them, because the folder organization for them is important for Minecraft to read them. So I recommend looking up some tutorials on that, as I will be getting specifically into custom blocks, assuming you already know about data packs and resource packs. So first things first, you create your custom model. As you can see, I've done that here. What's important to note is that if you open up a model from a that's already in the game and work off of that, so if I go into models here, any of these, if I can open them in here, I can export them as the same file type, even after editing them. So I can open any of these JSON files. If you want to know how to get these on your own, I'm not allowed to redistribute them due to copyright laws and Minecraft not allowing me to redistribute them. Because with these models, you could attempt to make the game for yourself without purchasing it. But assuming you've purchased Minecraft, if you want access to any of these, there's two ways. One is there's a plugin in BlockBench that will allow you to do this for entities. But if you want the same for any block, what you can do is you can in command prompt run %appdata%. You can navigate into your current version folder for Minecraft. My current's 1.19. And then it should be 1.19.jar. And then you copy it as .zip. So you copy it somewhere and then rename it .zip. And then extract it using WinRAR or the default extractor on Windows. And what this does is it includes every asset in the game, including all of these model folders. So these are JSON folders. These are what Minecraft uses to create models, how to know the shape of a block and stuff like that, what textures to call to, so that it knows what that block will look like as well. So you can open up any of these, and when you do, as you can see, I've messed with the scaffolding. In file, you can export as a block/item model. What does this mean? It means even after editing it, like I have here, clearly I've scrapped the top part of it. It's 3 blocks thick instead. It's not thick. I can put my own texture on it, edit it. So as you can see, I put my own texture on the top. You know, it's a bit see-through. It looks a little weird. But the point is, I can edit it however I want. I can add another cube. I can add another cube here and say like, okay, now this is part of it too. You know, now I have a little rod on the bottom. Whatever I do to it, I can export it as a block/item model. And this will mean it exports as a JSON file that you can put into your resource pack, into the models portion of your resource pack, or custom, as I have put it, inside of models. And it will read like this. It's something that Minecraft can read. And that's really important because it means you don't have to write any of this code. In BlockBench, you can do all this, export it, and then you don't have to worry about writing or editing any of this code. It does the rest for you. The only thing you need to do is make sure that whatever textures you did for it as well, off to the side here, I use default textures. Any textures you use as well are called to a file, and then at the top, you make sure they're called correctly, which is something I'll go into a second. So as you can see, I've made my own model for a cooking bench is what I'm calling it for now. And then I exported it as a JSON file type. Has its own textures. And then in the code, it calls to it. So because this is mostly done through BlockBench, I won't get too into depth. But the general gist is, these are all tags at the side. The first one is textures. And this pretty much says, okay, from now on, for the rest of the file, whenever I say these things, so 3, particle, side, or bottom, you will call to these files instead. So anywhere you see a 3, it means what it's really doing is it's saying, okay, go to custom/cooking bench topside and have that as the texture. And anywhere you see side, go to block/scaffolding side. So that's the default texture in the game. And for all of these portions, so these are all the cubes you created. These here are all the cubes you created in BlockBench. And here it's saying, okay, for this side of this cube, for these coordinates of the cube, this is the texture we want to use for it. So we call to #side, which we call up here this. So that's the gist of how these model files work. They pretty much are responsible for what kind of pixels they take up and the textures that you call to for them. I'm going to take a sip of water real quick. All right, excuse me. All right, so that's how these model files work. They tell you, they call to different textures that you create. Again, I'm assuming you know how to make your own resource packs. So if I go into textures and then go into custom and go into cooking bench topside, you can see that this thing we saw in BlockBench was there. And the model is calling to it. The model is saying, okay, go to that texture and grab, for coalface, it's saying grab part of it. For this, it's saying grab all of it, whatever. All right, so now that you've made your custom model with the custom textures, there are BlockBench tutorials out there if you do not know how to do that. I'm not proficient enough with BlockBench to warrant the need for me creating the same texture. But now that we've done our custom model and texture, let's get into the files, the DataPack files instead of the resource pack files. So as you can see here, I've created this little DataPack. I have the code here. The main things to know are you want to create in your functions a load and a tick. And what do these do? Load means whenever you load up the data pack, this code will execute. If it were a command block, it's effectively saying we're pressing a button. It activates once when on load, you know, when it first happens. For tick, instead it's happening every tick in Minecraft. So I believe how Minecraft works is every 60th of a second, the game is detecting everything that's happening. And what tick does is it says, okay, we want to execute this code every tick. So every 60th of a second, we do this. Instead of just once, we want it to constantly happen. All right, so let's go into my load file and kind of get a gist of how tags work and what we're doing here. So the first thing is just to make sure my data pack is loading. I have some tell raw. What that means is it's typing something into the text channel in Minecraft. So what we're saying is tell raw, and then anything at all players, anything in here. And what does this mean? Why didn't I just put text in there and say, like, call it pink, whatever? Well, the format for .mc function files, which are what these are, functions, they run like command blocks, requires the use of tags to understand what this is made of. So I want to tell everyone in the chat, what do I want to tell them? Well, for the text property, which is, if it isn't obvious already, this is the literal words that get displayed. I have the text tag and then a colon that says, okay, whatever comes next, that's what the text tag is. So text colon this, and all of this stuff highlighted here will be the text tag, which means in the game, it'll show up as the text. And then I put a comma, and what the comma does is it says, okay, now I'm going to start a new tag. This next tag is going to be color. And this is the color of the text. The color is formatted in the form of hash codes. You can look up how that works. But effectively, if there's any color you like, you can look up what is the hash code for that color. So if I look up what is blue hash code, there are plenty of colors with the hash code attached to it. So it says here, this is a good one. This is an example of blue. The hash code for this is this, which means if I copy paste this right here, and I put it right here, and that color will show up as the text in the game. I have chose pink and purple because they are my favorite colors, just to make sure they work. So as you can see, oh, and we have one more tag here, bold. This is a Boolean type tag. It means you put true or false after it. True means it will be bold. False means it will not be bold. That's how this tag works. So if I go into the game files and reload, if you do /reload, it will load up all the data packs you have, make sure all the code is working from scratch. You can see that it put the text in there. with the colors and the boldness that I wanted. All right, so now that we know our DataPack's working, let's actually get our item in the game. So the gist, the general synopsis of how we create our custom block is we have a problem. Blocks cannot have their own tags, which means they can't have their custom IDs. If I go into my texture pack here, into assets, Minecraft models. So these are all items. So if I go into bread, right, I have this extension. And what this does is says, okay, this is the texture we normally call for bread, unless we give it this ID. If we give it this ID, then instead we call to this model. And then we go into our models. I see in custom, we have this sushi model. And then for the texture, it's something different that I created. It's in custom/sushi. So if I go into textures, because that's what we're calling from, and then custom, you can see that I have my sushi texture here that it will call from. It's really tiny, but that's what it looks like. Blocks cannot do this. If you want to retexture a block, you can only do it with a texture pack. And that means that all of that block is going to look that way. So if you want a furnace, for example, that will only cook up fish, then you can do that with DataPack code. But when you want to retexture it, it means every furnace will look that way, even normal ones. So you won't be able to tell the difference between ones that are your custom one and ones that aren't. So how do we get a custom block in the game if blocks can't have their own tags like this? What we actually do is we create an item. We create an item frame that has a tag and has any tags we want. And then that item frame contains itself. It contains another copy of it with the same texture, except blown up to the size of a block. So what we're actually doing here for this custom block, before I explain the code for it, is I'm actually putting an invisible item frame here that contains the texture of this custom model blown up to look like a block. And as you can see, if I put on this glass, it isn't perfect. Mine isn't perfect. Mine's a little too tall. It's centered, but it's a little too tall. So as you can see, it kind of digs into the block below it. Excuse the rain. So what's actually happening here is there's an item frame that summons this model inside of itself and then blows it up so that it looks like it's the size of a block. And it's about the size of a block. If you want proof of this, you can see if I break here where the item frame would be, that the custom model goes away. I broke it, I killed it. And instead, this block is left behind. Why is this block left behind? Well, at the same time I summoned my item frame, I also summoned a block at its position. And the purpose of summoning the block was to say, okay, I want a hitbox to work off of. So if I set the time to day so that it's a little more clear, you can see that I didn't do this perfectly either. If I put down this block and then put my mouse over it, you can see that the icon, the little highlight that goes along here for the hitbox, isn't the same as the block. So if I hit here, it won't break. But if I finally go here where the model for the scaffolding's hitbox is, then it is. So what I really did here, just to recap, if there's an invisible item from here that contains an item that looks like this, I made sure it looked like it was about the size of a block. And if I go back into BlockBench, you can see where I did that. This is in animations, which I'll just go into the scaffolding table instead. If I go into display, you can see, okay, what does it look like in an item frame? Instead, I want it to like be out. I want it to be maybe out more. And then I want it to be bigger so that it's about the size of a block, whatever. And I can put it there. And so effectively, I'm faking it. I'm saying there's actually an item in here that's about the size. Please don't save this. That'd be terrible. That's about the size of a Minecraft block. And I made its texture just big enough to cover the scaffolding underneath it so that it has a hitbox equal to the scaffolding. All right. So now that I've gone over that, how do you code this? Well, the item in my hand currently is actually an item frame that contains itself and looks like this, right? So I need to give myself an item frame with the custom tags. So let's do that. In the load function that I have open right now, let's close the resource pack, I give the nearest player, I'm the only one in the world, it's myself. This is just an example to show how to get the item. If you want to create custom crafting, you can for items like this. There are tutorials on that as well. But anyway, so just to make sure it works, what you should do is you should say, I give the nearest player an item frame. And in this, how is this item frame displayed? I gave it a custom name, cooking bench. So just to prove that this is a cooking bench with that name, if you can see here, if I disable my resource pack, it's an item frame in my hand. And when I put it down, it's invisible, but holds another item frame inside of it, and then summons scaffolding on it. And if I break it, it deletes the item frame at the same time. And if I turn it back on, you can see that it really was an item frame the whole time. And it's holding something. It's holding its own texture. But in this case, I've changed its texture. How did I do this? Again, in the code, I gave it a tag after renaming it so that it says cooking bench in my hand. I gave it a tag separated by a comma that says custom model data and then my custom number 2, which means that when we want to look for the model, it'll go into this assets pack. It'll go all the way into models. First, it says item frame, right? And it says, okay, oh, we found this number. So instead, we want to use this model instead, custom/cooking bench. And this is what the item looks like in your hand or in an item frame. If I go back to load, so it's calling to that unique type. And then the next tag is entity tag. So this is the entity for the item frame. These are all the entity tags for the item frame. First things first, I made it silent so that when I place it, it doesn't make a noise, because I don't want to really give away that it's actually secretly an item frame. With the texture covering it, I want it to look like a cooking bench. With tags, some, again, as I said, Boolean types, true or false. In Minecraft, 1b means true. So if I want to replace this with true, you can look at what these tags are, but I'm just going to use true false for the sake of simplicity. If I set it just true and then save it and then reload my pack /reload, you can see that when I place it, it's still quiet. It doesn't make a noise. So that's just what 1b means in the tag. Why is it like that? That's just kind of the formatting for the code. I don't know why whoever came up with the language did it that way. There's obviously some reason related to computer parts, whatever, how they did it, why that was the best way to do it. Perhaps it has something to do about hexadecimal code, whatever. Point is, I made it silent, and then I gave it some other entity tags. I gave it the cooking bench tag in case I want to call to it later. I don't have that anywhere, so this isn't exactly useful now, but it's just like a unique way to give it a name inside of the code. And then I said, for this item frame, I want to give it an item. So the item tag gives it an item. And inside, I gave it an item frame. I gave one of it. The count is 1b. Again, there are different formattings. You could put a 1 here. It would work just as well. But 1b is the natural way the code works, so that's what I have it set to right now. And I gave it this custom model data. So it is an item frame with this ID that contains itself. As you see here, it was here too. I initially said, okay, we create an item frame with this ID, and then inside of it, we give it an item that again is the item frame with this custom ID. But outside of all these entity tags, so these tags here are the entity tags for what's inside of the item frame. Or sorry, inside here. These tags are what's inside the item frame, right? So then I said, okay, now that I have this item frame that contains another item frame, and they both have this custom ID, and this custom ID will instead link to this custom texture and its custom model, I need to make the initial item frame invisible. Because if it's not, then there will be a little item frame connected to the bottom. If that wasn't invisible, as you saw when I disabled the resource pack, it was holding an item frame. But if that initial item frame is invisible, this item frame right here would be visible. And we don't really want that. And as you can see, if I break it, just to prove there is the item frame there, the custom model goes away and only the scaffolding is left. So, anyway, I made it invulnerable so that it cannot be destroyed. Clearly I failed there. I was breaking it as, but I am in creative, so never mind, that makes sense. I guess I should test that, huh? So I have it here. Let's check that that invulnerable tag works. /game mode survival. Let's say I want to break it. You can hear me hitting it, but it's not breaking. If I do this, it breaks, and that thing goes away. So the item frame's there, but it's invisible and invulnerable, so perfect. It's working how we want it to. I made it fixed. This fixes its position. This is kind of just like a safety thing. And then I also set facing. If the reason I did this is because it's an item frame, right? So if I place it on the side of a block, then it will not face straight up. It will instead face to the side. Facing tag for item frames ensures that it will always be facing up. As you can see here, when I mouse over, it'll tell me the direction the item frame is facing. So if I, as the user, want to put like an item frame here, because I want it to act like a block, right? And if I put a block here, then it'll just place it next to it. So I want it to do the same thing, even though it's an item frame. So facing it up forces it to look like a block that faces up all the time. So that's what that tag does. If you want to know what all these tags, oh, and then I gave a 1 at the end outside so that I only give myself 1. If I put 3 here instead and save and reload, /reload, I have 19 in my inventory right now. You can see it gave me 3 instead. I'm now up to 22. So let's go back down to 1, just for my own sake, because my inventory fills up really quick, and reload. Give me 1 again. So that's how that whole tag works. So this makes sure that it works. The whole purpose of this code right here, the give, is making sure that I'm calling the right item and all my models and textures are connected and it acts and behaves like a block. If you want a better knowledge of tags and how they work, there is a wiki for it on the Minecraft wiki. These are all the tags. So my color picker open, let me get rid of that. It's a lovely little tutorial. As you can see here, when I click on blocks, there's barely any tags, so most of them don't work. They only work on blocks as items. What does this mean? It means if you're holding the block, this is what tags work. So it means this can only be placed on certain things. They only work as an item in your hand. When you actually place down the block, it no longer has any tags. That's why we have to do this really weird process of summoning an item frame with an item frame in it, because blocks do not have their own tags. If I scroll back up and I go down to item frames or armor stands, they're also really good. You can see it has all these different tags, rotations, invisible, fixed, that determine how the item frame works. All right, so one thing I did not test that I just noticed from looking at the tags is if I right click on that item frame, will it rotate the model? And no, it doesn't. That might be what fix does. If you're worried that isn't how it works, then you can set that with this tag here. This item rotation, make sure, set it to the number you want, and it'll be one of the angles all in a circle. You know how how things spin in an item frame. But to continue with the code to make sure your block works fine, now that we've created this invisible item frame in which a fake scaffolding is placed inside of its texture so that it has a hitbox and it works, we want to make sure that we can actually break it and it will remove the block, and we can place it and it will summon the scaffolding. So in the tick, what do? I have two commands here. One, execute as makes it so whatever your command is, it will execute as whatever you put next. So execute as at E means at every. And then in this little thing, I decide at every what. So this is, I'm executing a command and I'm pretending that the game is pretending that this at everyone is going to do this command. And then these things in the square brackets determine who, I kind of narrow down who the everyone is. So instead of executing as every entity, I only want to activate this command as every item frame, and only if the tag equals cooking bench. As if we go back to the item, as we said, I gave it this cooking bench tag. That's where this kind of kicks in. If the tag is cooking bench, and if the tag equals placed, this is a custom tag that determines whether or not the block is currently placed down, or the item frame, sorry, is currently placed down. If it's an item frame called cooking bench and has a tag that is not placed, the exclamation point in code means not. It means whatever you're saying after is the opposite. So equals placed would say, oh, okay, if it's placed. Equals exclamation point placed means if it's not equal placed. So I'm executing as every entity that is an item frame with this name, with this tag, that is not currently placed. And then where are we executing this command? At, I believe, I should look up what /s is just to make sure I don't accidentally educate you improperly. At s Minecraft, target selectors. At s is at the entity executing the command. So this means we want to, as every item frame that has these tags, we want to activate at that item frame this command. So if I instead put at 0640, that's the coordinate that this command would happen. The next thing we put is the command. So everything before this is where the command is going to happen. So execute as every entity that is an item frame with these tags. At all of those entities, we run the following function. So my current data pack is called love. I am running a function inside love, and then I've created a folder called cooking bench in which I put down a place function, and this is a command. I did the same thing for remove. It does the same thing, but triggers a different function when you want to get rid of the block. So what does it do? It says execute as every entity that is an item frame with these following tags that has cooking bench and is placed, not placed, but is placed, and then execute the following command at that entity, which is every item frame with these tags, unless the block at that current position, that these are coordinates, they mean current position. If you put 1 here, this would mean 1 block above your current position. If I replace this with a 64, that means at your current position, but at a height of 64. If a scaffolding is there, run this function. So let me rephrase that. Execute as every item frame with these tags at all of those item frames. Unless the block at the position is a scaffolding, run the following function. All right, so let's go into these functions. First thing I did is I created a folder that had these files. What is the place function? The first thing I do is I put a scaffolding there, and then I call it placed. So what does this do? This is why there's a little scaffolding inside, because it detects, it pretty much acts as a hitbox for the block. All I did was I created an item frame here, it's invisible right now, and I put a scaffolding there to act as the hitbox. That's all it does. And then I called it placed so that I know if I break it in the future and I click on it in the future and it's placed, I can break it. So what does the remove function do? The remove function will first of all summon the custom item. This is effectively the same thing as what I put in the load. It is the custom item with the custom IDs. It only gives one of them. So that when I kill the scaffolding here with the item frame at that position, it will drop the unique item frame. That's what that code does. The next thing I do is I kill the scaffolding there. The next thing I do is when I click on here, I kill the scaffolding. Because if I set this down, for example, I try and click on it and break it and I don't kill the scaffolding, a scaffolding item will drop. So the tick that you break this, right, because there is a oh, let me clear the weather. So there is a scaffolding here that acts as a hitbox, right? Well, if I don't include this part of the command here, then a scaffolding item will drop. I can prove that, right? I can go into here. I can comment this out. That means the code is there, but it doesn't actually do anything. That's how a comment works. Make sure I save everything. So let's reload, /reload. If I click on this position and break it, a scaffolding should drop with it. It might be because I'm creative. Game mode, survival. Oh yeah. So because I was in creative, it just destroyed it automatically. As you can see, a scaffolding will break with it now. So we need to do a command that only drops the custom item and not the scaffolding that is the acting as the hitbox. So that's what this code here does. So if I reload the code and I try again, you can see that scaffolding no longer drops with it. And then the last thing is we want to kill the item frame that is there. We want to get rid of the item frame that is executing this command, right? Because we don't want an item frame to remain there. So that's what that last thing does. The kill at s is a way to say /kill the entity that is executing the command. So it's kind of a way to say kill itself. If I was to type that in right now, it would kill me, the player. So that's what it does. Just to let you know, I do have a comment here called, for armor stands, because initially I was summoning an armor stand within it, but I'm no longer using that. It has nothing to do with this tutorial. There are advantages to summoning item frames in things if you want to do right-click detection, which I plan on implementing. So the point is, this little code here is not necessary for your thing. It's just a comment. This little green text, you can get rid of it. It doesn't do the same thing. All right, so just a synopsis. The tick function is happening every tick, every 60th of a second. Every 60th of a second, it is detecting, it is executing these commands, and it's saying, okay, if something's has the not placed tag or is placed tag, execute these functions. So every single function is saying, okay, we see that you put down an armor stand here, or an item frame. When I right click here, the game is saying, okay, I see that you put an item frame here with the custom ID. So because I detected it, because I detected that there's a placed one, I'm going to summon a scaffolding there and call it placed. So that when you break it, so that when we detect that you try to break it, because the tag equals placed here, we can execute the remove function. And then I go to the remove function, and we say, okay, we get rid of the item frame with all those unique tags. Then we kill the scaffolding item that will drop from it. Then we kill the item frame itself that was holding the unique texture. So that is a recap of how to add custom blocks, how they work, and why they do it this way. Just to go over my thoughts on this process, I think the coding language for commands is nice. I think it allows for a lot of customization, but it does have the glaring problem of how complicated it is. If the developers simply allowed blocks to have NBT tags, which they didn't probably for other coding restriction. I'm not saying they are incompetent or anything. Obviously they're not. They created this whole game. The coding for this would be so much easier. I don't know if we'll ever get that kind of functionality, so this is the way we have to do it for now with item frames. In other tutorials, you may see methods where they do invisible armor stands that are wearing a helmet block, and then you scale that item, or a helmet as an item, and then you lower it and scale it to the size of a block instead of doing the same thing with an item frame. There are plenty of tutorials out there. I just wanted to give an in-depth one on how the code worked, so this is my attempt at providing one. I hope it helps anybody. If anyone has any questions or suggestions on how to change this video, I'd really appreciate it. This is my devlog on how I've been creating it. It's been extremely difficult. Initially, I tried to create custom crops. That's a whole nother mess that I'm going to try to figure out and get into. But yeah, that's my tutorial for now. I hope it was useful. If you have any questions, please feel free to comment.